This is Josh White with JW Math Tutoring. In today's video, I'm going to tell you the 5 tips you need to know in order to earn a perfect score on the digital SAT math exam. So let's go ahead and take a look.
But life is a dream the calculus could never predict.
Before I begin this video, where I'm going to go through the 5 tips that you need to know in order to maximize your digital SAT math score, I just want to mention 2 things. Okay, first, in general, I find that supposed tips videos or videos that promise to give you tips to, increase your SAT score or whatever are garbage. Most of them are either useless, useless things that you should already know or already be aware of, or they don't offer anything actionable. They're just basically like generic word salad tips that don't give you clear, concrete steps to actually follow and actually complete, in order to, say, increase your digital SAT math score. So in general, most tips videos that I've come across or that I've seen, on YouTube are basically just garbage. Don't even waste your time watching them. This video, however, is different because I'm going to go through and explain exactly what the things that you need to do, clear, concise steps in order to improve your digital SAT math score, or specifically if you are aiming for a perfect score. The second thing to be aware of is that these tips apply to anyone, and I'll talk about this a little bit more on the next screen, but this is not solely for people who currently have a 750 or a 770 and are aiming to get an 800. All right, so with those 2 things out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So as I just mentioned briefly and previously, these are basically 5 essential tips, or say like best practices or specific things that you need to do in order to maximize your digital SAT math score. And as I also mentioned, they apply to anyone regardless of whether your score goal is an 800 or a 500. Okay? Now, some of them, basically specifically the last tip, will probably not apply if your goal is to score, say, a 500 or a 600, but most of the other tips still would apply to you regardless. All right, tip number 1. You must complete all of the College Board practice materials. So this includes all of the Blue Book practice tests, both the 7 practice SAT exams, and, more importantly, the practice PSAT tests as well. Now, you're probably asking, well, why would I complete the PSAT test? I took the PSAT in grade 10 or grade 9 or whatever, or maybe grade 11, and now I'm, studying to take the SAT. The reason is because even though in general the PSAT exams, would be easier, first, it's good practice. It's just more questions to practice with and complete. And second, and this is the most important part, they reuse the questions. They repeat the questions from the Blue Book practice test on the exams. There's a ton of examples I could give. So like one that came up on the December test was the one with the right triangle, and you draw the altitude to the from the right angle to the hypotenuse of the right triangle, and it wants to know what's the ratio of BD to BC, or I forget which way it is, BC to BD, whatever it is. That problem is directly from one of the PSAT practice tests in Blue Book. Okay, I'm not going to tell you which one because I don't want to, spoil it for you. But if you had gone through the Blue Book PSAT practice test, both of them, and primarily I'm talking about the grade 10 ones. I don't think you necessarily need to do the grade 8, 9 practice tests, but you can do those as well. But if you had gone through both those practice tests and specifically seen that problem, then you should have known how to do it and had an idea to solve it, and would not have been completely confused on the test, if you received that question. Related to that, College Board also has linear non-adaptive paper practice tests. Now, most of the materials most of the problems overlap with the Blue Book practice test, but there are some questions that are unique, i.e. do not overlap. Those are the questions that you need to complete. There's 96 total questions across the 7 linear non-adaptive paper practice test, basically practice tests 4 through 10. So essentially, you complete all those. That is the equivalent of like a little bit more than 2 full practice tests worth of problems. And some of them are relatively basic and easy, but then some of them are hard and difficult. And again, they repeat and reuse some of those questions. You will see questions from the Blue Book exams on official SAT exams. You will see questions from these linear non-adaptive paper practice tests. I'm talking specifically about the unique non-repeating questions on SAT exams. So you need to complete all these so that you know how to do those problems. And therefore, if you happen to come across one of them on an official test, you know how to solve it. The second tip, you need to analyze your practice tests. So one easy way to do this is to create an error log. In this error log, you're basically going to track all the problems you missed, and you're basically going to write down basic information like, okay, the day and the test number and the reason why you missed it, your answer, the correct answer, and then also the takeaway or the solution. And I will put on the screen, and there'll also be a link in the description and pinned comment of the video, an example of an error log that I use with students. Basically a blank one. And just so first, some of the reasons, for example, that you could put down as why you missed the problem, it could be something like a careless mistake. You added wrong, or you forgot to carry over a negative sign, or you misread, you misread the problem, you put the x-intercept instead of the y-intercept or whatever. Other reasons could be you just ran out of time. You didn't get to solve the problem when you're doing it in Blue Book because you didn't have enough time, basically at the end. You just had to guess. And then obviously another reason would be that maybe you didn't know the material. You just are not familiar with the material. You never learned it. You didn't know, what the steps were to do. Most of the reasons are going to fall into one of those three categories. But the whole key here is to basically, track the mistakes you're making and see why you are making them, and to avoid making them in the future, and also to basically review these mistakes as you're prepping for the official test. Now, in addition to that, when we talk about analyzing your practice tests, you want to look for alternate methods to solve the problems that you missed. Generally, do not look at the solutions that are offered, say, in Blue Book, or technically it'd be on the website, the mypractice, .college board website, where you go to look up your score and so on. If you look at the solutions there, most of the time it's going to be very difficult to follow. It's going to be confusing, especially for the advanced problems. It's going to be confusing. They're not going to talk about how you can use Desmos. They're not going to show you these easy, techniques that you can use to solve the problem, like back solving or picking numbers or process of elimination and so on. So you need to find alternate methods to solve these problems that you've missed. Now, of course, one way to do this is to find solutions on YouTube that show these alternate methods. And I'm obviously going to promote, my solutions to all of the Blue Book practice tests and the 96 unique linear non-adaptive paper practice problems, because for pretty much every problem in there, I like to go through as many methods as possible. So, but it doesn't have to be mine. There's plenty of other people out there that have solutions as well. But the point is, you need to find, and this will also be kind of discussed in another tip that's coming up later, it's kind of related to it, basically the easiest method that makes sense for you to solve the problem. And then, of course, lastly, you need to do practice problems on the topic that you missed. So once you go through your error log and you see, the various types of problems that you missed, and I forgot to mention too, one of the things in the error log you're going to write down is the general topic. And so you could put down, you can write this however you want. You could, put right triangles or similar triangles or whatever, volume of a cylinder, whatever it is that's easy for you to keep track of. But you then need to do practice problems on those specific topics of the problems that you missed. Now, the third tip is you must learn and practice Desmos. Now, why? Why is this important? Well, for multiple reasons. First, it can save you time for mundane, easily repeatable tasks. And so we're talking about things like finding the equation of a line if you're given 2 points. Finding the equation of a line, you're given the point a point on the line and the slope on the line, solving systems of equations, solving basic equations, Pythagorean theorem, all those kind of things, you need to learn how to do them in Desmos to help save time. Okay, so you have as much time as possible left for the harder or more difficult problems. The other reason of why it's important to learn and practice using Desmos is because it can solve some, and the keyword here is some, not all, but some problems in a quicker, more efficient manner than the traditional way of doing it by hand. Or it can also help you solve some problems that you otherwise might not know how to solve. Okay, problems that you don't know how to solve by hand or end up being too complicated and you can't figure out how to do by hand. But if you learn Desmos and become familiar with it, then you can go ahead and use that to solve these specific problems. Now, one thing I do want to stress is that, not every problem needs Desmos. And this is going to be explained in a little more detail in the next tip that's coming up, which is tip 4. So, just keep that in mind. And again, I'll talk about that in a little more detail on the next slide. Now, where can you learn how to use Desmos? Well, obviously, I would, promote my ultimate Desmos guide to digital SAT math. Basically my playlist. It's over 6 hours. There are over 65 practice problems. It covers core skills and intermediate skills and advanced skills and even, basically methods of regression to show you how to solve some of the hardest problems out there. So obviously, I would promote that as a great resource. Tutorlini also has an excellent Desmos guide. It is a couple years old. The first 15 videos do use Blue Book questions, but they're only from practice tests 1 through 4. And since practice tests 1 through 3 have been retired, it's really only possibly practice test 4 that, it might, spoil some questions on, unless I guess if there's a couple random ones on practice test 1 through 3 that were reused for practice tests 8 through 10, then there might be an issue with that, but I don't think that generally is going to be an issue. Besides that, Ella Sharma's book is also an excellent resource. I've heard that she is redoing it, so there should be a new version of that coming out soon. And just to show you what I mean, it is I can't show it without the background filter coming out, but the top of it looks like this. Desmos Graphing Calculator, Digital SAT Math Prep. Okay, so that's another resource you could use as well. It has pretty much all of the core and intermediate skills. It doesn't have all of the advanced skills, though, so that's just one thing to be aware of. Now, the fourth tip. This is the one I mentioned reference on the last slide. The whole goal of any problem is to identify the quickest and easiest and most efficient method to solve it. So that means either doing the traditional method, which would basically be the method you most likely learned how to solve the problem, in school. And most likely you'd be doing it by hand on paper, but you could also be using Desmos, to assist for some of the calculations or some of the parts of it. That's what I call the traditional method. Okay, then you also have the Desmos methods, which is basically solving either nearly or mostly, either nearly the entire problem or most of the problem, in Desmos. In addition to that, you've also got various techniques you can use. Back solving, picking numbers, the idea of process of elimination, where you go through and eliminate the 3 wrong answers to be left with the 1 correct answer. If you're not familiar with those techniques and how they work, check out the other videos on my channel here. I will post links in the description and in the pinned comment that go through some of those techniques, at least back solving and picking numbers in a little bit more detail. And so another example of this would be on a lot of the right triangle problems, instead of using say the similar triangle property approach, which is what the College Board wants you to use, if you look up their answer to the problem, that's what they would show how to solve it using similar triangle properties. Instead, you could use basic trig, SOHCAHTOA, to figure out the measure of angles or the length of sides, and use that with Pythagorean theorem or something else to go ahead and solve for the 2 sides that you're looking for or the angle you're looking for, or whatever it is. So The whole point, the whole key is you want to look at a problem and identify for you what is the quickest, easiest, most efficient method. If that's the traditional method by hand, that's fine. Just work it out, and you don't need to use Desmos or whatever. You want to use a physical calculator to assist with it, like that's fine. But the point is, you need to be open to using as many different methods as possible to again help you save time. The last tip, you must practice the hardest math problems available. So, in addition to the practice test, practice test in Blue Book and the linear paper non-adaptive practice test that I mentioned earlier, where do you get hard problems? Well, the question bank is a great place to start. Obviously, you would set the difficulty level to hard. And again, this is the tip here that is primarily addressed to those who are, say, aiming for an 800, meaning you're 700 or 750 and above and you want to score an 800. If you're aiming for a 500, 600, this probably doesn't apply to you so much. Anyways, as I was saying, the question bank is a great resource. So you want to start there. You want the educator version of the question bank, just so you know, on the website. The problem is the user interface on it is not great. So there are other sites out there that mirror it. OnePrep, which was great, apparently has been bought by some other company, and some things have changed about it, and it's I guess not as good as it was previously when it was completely free. Um, but there's also some other websites as well that basically have the same questions, but just with a better interface and Desmos integrated and so on. So that's a great place to start. In addition to that, check out my official test problem set worksheet playlist. This is 388 problems that have been self-reported, and I've sourced from official exams going back to May of 2024, up through December of 2025, where I make worksheets with these problems on them, and then I work out the problems, record videos, show you the full solutions to the problems, and you can download the worksheet, and work on the problems ahead of time, and then go ahead and check your solutions, and watch the videos. So that's definitely a resource to look at as well. And related to that, I also now have an Excel spreadsheet which has all the problems listed in it. It doesn't have the full text in the description of it. I mean, some of it does, but some it's just a more basic description. But that allows you to sort and filter by like the general problem topic or subtopic, and it shows you which questions are repeated. So if you find a specific problem and you want to work on other similar ones, you can search in the spreadsheet and you can see, oh, well, there's another one like this from October 24, and then there's another one from March 25, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, also check out Tutor Leany's problem set worksheets as well. There are 12 of those. You can find the playlist on his YouTube channel, but there'll also be a link in the description of the video and pinned comment as well. So there's 84 total problems. Basically, there's 7 problems per worksheet, and those are, again, meant to be some of the hardest problems out there. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and sign up for notifications. If you have any questions or comments about this, please feel free to leave them, obviously in the comments section below. But otherwise, good luck as you are preparing for the digital SAT math section.